Hello, everyone. Today we're going to talk about the basics and get excited about the little nuances around the basics. And the basics are, what are values? And what does it mean for them to be satisfied? And what does it mean for them to be frustrated? It's a foundational piece, and it's often where we actually get the most lost and confused. Coming back to basics usually helps. So we each have examples that we're hoping to share. We've got Christina and Corrine and myself, Allie, and we've got Gavin, who is our faithful, enthusiastic values learner. So thanks for joining us too, Gavin. Um, so we're going to get into examples of values, but first, Corrine, as the creator of all this business, I'd love to hear from you about setting the stage for us around values. Why do we even use values? Some people talk about needs, some people talk about desires, some people talk about any number of different ways of describing how we make decisions and what we're made up of. Why do we use values, and what even are they?
hmm So, really, values are critical to our self knowledge because they are the root of the unconscious motivators that help us better understand our behaviors, our triggers when we bring awareness to our own unique value set, what that value means to us, and how it expresses itself in our lives. So, it's really like these values are inside and unique to each of us, and then there's some common ones in our society and in our family units, but the way we understand them, think about the values, emotionally react to when those values are satisfied and frustrated, and the way we behave, make decisions, choose one thing over another, the way we react with people, the words that we choose, how we express ourselves. These are all connected, directly connected down into these unconscious motivational systems that we can name as values. And to your point, Allie, like needs. I have to have these positions of where we end up saying like my way or the highway, or these like big like laying down lines in the sand. These are all directly connected back to what your individual values are and the way you experience those values, the way you define them, the way you feel when they're frustrated and satisfied. It's well documented in psychological research. And when I say that, I mean like things like Psychology Today, like those kind of publications, periodicals, self-help books like Brene Brown, um, leadership publications like the Harvard Business Review. That it's really well documented that knowing your values is really important and even critical to leading a meaningful life, or being a good citizen, or being a healthy member of a family unit, or a community, or being a leader. So it's well documented that knowing your values is really important. And just knowing your values isn't enough. So we have a link on our website that helps people identify, like, leading you through like narrowing it down, narrowing it down, narrowing it down. Then you get sort of your top five or top 10, whatever, however many you want. But knowing them isn't enough. You have to have a relationship with them. You have to be able to observe how they are driving your thoughts, how they are driving your emotions, how they are driving the decisions that you make or the things that you choose to do. So it's not just enough to know them. That's not going to change your life. What's going to change your life is understanding how to observe yourself in action and be able to track each of those things back to here is the value that's at play. And that's really important. And we totally believe that knowing your personal values can lead to deep self-knowledge, being able to communicate your deeply held values, making satisfying decisions that will last and will ultimately create a values-based life that meets your measure of success. So there's like so many good reasons to know and understand and um, create a relationship, create an understanding of understanding yourself through through self-observation of when these values are being activated and triggered, either in a positive way, satisfied, or in a negative way. And what we're going to talk about today is really diving into how do we observe when they're frustrated, and how do we observe when they're frustrated, satisfied and frustrated.
Yay! All the important things about this baseline. And I love that you're hitting on that the values are talked about a lot. And then the how is this big blank page in anything that I learn about or read about as well. I tend to screenshot and save and create like Pinterest boards of people talking about values because I get excited about it. And I usually think about it as like a way to hinge into our work because there's this inspiring statement about how important values are. And I'm like, yeah, you're saying it. And then it's like, okay, next chapter, and not into how to do it. So it's a perfect hinge into the how. Christina, Gavin, any thoughts you have based on what Corinne laid out or any questions about what she said?
If I just may add, I think that for myself, anyways, being an engineer, I think it's important for me to keep in mind that when I articulate my values, it's just an approximation. It's close. It's like the best you could do at the moment, but you don't really know your values. So you're always kind of seeing how it comes up in different situations. That humility and that uncertainty about what it is, I think is critical for me anyways, because everything else about being an engineer has certainty and precision and definition, and that's not really what we're talking about here,
Mm-hmm.
I
And I'll
think.
just add to that too. I love that humility. That this is a journey. Oh my gosh. This is a journey to knowing yourself and having a relationship with yourself using values as a lens through which we can start to understand what we do and why we do it. And the other thing what you said about humility made me think that we also hold space when we know our values and we understand our values and we have this sort of compassionate space for ourselves, that we also hold space for other people to express their values or to even help them understand what their values are. So we have more depth in our conversation, and that they're participating in a similar way, if possible. We can't make them have a conversation about values if they're genuinely not ready for it, because that can be sort of manipulative. But if there is that space, and we can create that space, then it's quite lovely to be able to do that with and for each other as well.
Yeah, and I love that you just alluded to that, Corinne, because that's exactly how um integrating myself with values-based living has really changed the way that I live my life, because just understanding what triggers me has really assisted me when it comes to conflict resolution. You know, I always was stuck in this never-ending tornado. It seemed that, you know, there would be conflict and it would either be a, you know, a lose-lose situation or a win-lose situation, which usually isn't in my favor, because before I often was a doormat, and you know, I would just be more of a people pleaser, that archetype. And just being able to understand that I can satisfy my own values, and that there's actually a frustrated value too, that I could actually communicate that very clearly. And it got us to a point where it was more of a win-win, you know, a compromise where we each get something that we need, or at least the acknowledgement, and that solution-based thinking where, you know, okay, it might not work at this particular moment in time, but can we get to that point? And it's definitely a powerful tool to have, just knowing those basic foundations. And then you can also help others, like you had mentioned, build that space where you can follow that journey together.
So why don't we each give an example, if and as we want to, of one of our values, sharing one of our top values, and then give an example of when it has been frustrated and when it has been satisfied. Um, Oh, actually, before that, it might be helpful, like when we're talking about the how, to just give examples of how we came up with our top 5 values. There's a gazillion different ways you could do it. We have a bunch of different things to push off against, like the values quiz that Corrine talked about. There's a link to it, and you literally click through from a bunch of example values. And there's our course, like the Know Your Values course, that gives sort of like a space with an expert facilitator there to help massage things. But are there any tidbits that any of you have around how you came up with your top 5 values? I'll give an example and then I'll maybe go to Christina and see what you want to add. For me, I needed to be very meticulous about this. I took this very seriously. Being a mediator and opening to like self-reflection was so energizing to me. I was never a better student than when I was asked to do this sort of work. And before this, my previous schooling, I graduated like by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Like it was very difficult, but with this stuff, I was so motivated to just like look into every nook and cranny. So I had like pages and pages of values, and I was circling all the ones that resonated with me at all. So I had like 100, these are the 100 top values. And then, okay, if I had to force myself, could I reduce it and reduce it and reduce it down to 5? And then I found that I needed to define my top values using other values and giving myself permission to put other value names underneath each of the values, letting the top value be an umbrella value. And so it ended up plumping back up to actually probably about 40 values. So I keep them as maintenance. I keep my values front and center in my house and on my phone, and I'll have my core, but then I'll have this spider web of other sub values underneath the values to help me track the little micro instances in life that might not as obviously connect to a top value, but it connects to a sub value within a top value. And for me, that like meticulous way of really wanting to track internal trajectories, that's really helped me. I'll also say that in doing that process, I needed to carve out solitude time to do it. I needed to ask myself questions about what's important to me about this aspect of my life, to hone in on the value around, let's say, health or friendships. What's important to me about friendships? What's the most important thing to me about friendships? And then pausing and waiting and letting myself not have an answer right away. And the important part about this is I can get excited about seeing what other people would say and comparing, and really working hard to not do that for pockets of time. For pockets of time doing that, but for pockets of time just letting myself not compare and letting there be the answer being I don't know until eventually something comes up. And then the thing that comes up, like snagging it, not needing it to be approved values word, but just being like, hey, I don't know what that means, that sentence or that image or that color or whatever, but I'm snagging it because it has something to do with what's important to me about whatever. For example, one of my values is self-trust. And whenever I say that, I always think, is self-trust even a value? I don't even know if that's really what, but I've tried other sub values. There's like sub values within self-trust, like safety and honesty and courage. And it doesn't feel right to pick one of those. So I'm just letting it be what it feels right to be, which is self-trust, and not needing it to follow any sort of formula. And then the last thing I'll say is when I'm carving out this solitude time to reflect on my values, whether it's for the first time or for the gajillionth time to check in on them, remembering that the point of this is about learning more about myself and increasing the self-knowledge, not about manipulating my values so that I can be as productive as possible or manipulating them so I can feel like I'm as good a person as possible. And so they end up turning into more like goals than what's actually important to me. But letting myself be super, super honest about what I'm noticing about myself. Even if I don't like the answer, letting that just be what it is and sitting with all my you know, yucky parts and lovely parts that I'm proud of and parts that I'm not, and letting them go on the paper that I'm writing on.
So it's very interesting because we're fairly similar. I have a very analytical brain. I break down essentially each of my interactions, especially the ones that where I have felt frustrated because I have this inclination to really understand what happened. Why did this occur? Why did this person say such a thing or do such a thing, or why did I do such a thing or say such a thing? And so I actually love using the values inventory list that VBL has supplied. It has hundreds of words, and essentially I first go through the list to determine like what really resonates, because there's lots of words that are like, yep, yep, that I do value that, but then there's like, that's a core value. There's a deal breaker there if something gets frustrated with that. And so I like to take five at the very beginning. I just took five that really resonated with me, and then I looked at their definitions because I found that the word is not necessarily as important as what it means. Because sometimes I can find a broad term that would piece together multiple multiple words in one so that it has a more powerful meaning behind it. So for example, um, I'm just going to say balance. Balance is one of my core values, and it means, being productive. It means self-care. It means connecting with others, but finding a balance between them all because they're all very important to me. But I need to have essentially an equal portion of it all in order to feel satisfied. I can't have one day of just Netflix and chill because I go crazy the fact that I did nothing productive. But if I could at least do one major task and then be a couch potato for the rest of my day before my kids come home, great. I'll sign me up. So just going back to once I define these terms, I like to what I call experiment with it. So I take a month. I'll just analyze my interactions. I'll take note of when I felt satisfied, when I felt frustrated, and I capture all this in my planner that I have. And at the end of the month, I just do that self-reflection that I'm used to doing, and I kind of see whether or not my interactions and what I've took note reflects those core values. Now, at the beginning, I found that, okay, I had more interactions that were satisfied when I had true connection with people. And I felt really frustrated when I was trying to have a conversation and somebody was looking at their phone all the time. Or when my kids are watching TV at the dinner table and I can't connect with them. So I understood that connection is a very important value to me, and that connection is part of love. So initially I had written love, but it was a little bit more, I had to dig down deep to see, okay, what about these interaction was clashing? What was really grinding its gears? And it was that connection piece for love for me. So I moved out of, not that love isn't important, but that connection component of love was more important and drove a lot of my interactions. So with that, I mean, I feel like I've got a really good sense on my top 5 values, but I do strongly believe that they evolve as we experience different experiences, as we go through different walks of life, go to the next chapters in life, um, and uh, and I really do enjoy every month going back to um, my VBL planner, looking at, my interactions, and really seeing if my top 5 are still true or not. And they're fairly consistent, but I can see after, looking back a year, 2 years, 3 years, that they have really changed. And I feel like I'm really enriching that definition part. So for those that are not sure if they're doing it right, or, you see all these words and like, they're all me, I really think that they all resonate with me. Um, just play around with it. Just because you don't pick a word for your top 5 values doesn't mean it's not important to you. It's just really that driver behind um, yourself and the way you interact and the way you're motivated. And it doesn't mean that the other ones are any less valuable. It really depends on the interaction. Sometimes another one will come up out of nowhere, and you're gonna have to sit and think about, like, okay, what is this? Is this going to be here for the long term, or is it just a temporary flare up,
Corrine, what are some, I mean, I'm going to guess it's similar to what you ended up creating in the course, but if there's anything else you would say about like how you actually get into the zone around creating or checking in with values. And then Gavin, I'll ask you the same question too, in case there's anything that you want to share about what you have created around your own process.
Mm-hmm. I like both of you are talking, and I'm like, yeah, me too. Which isn't a surprise because we're, doing this work, talking this through together. And I think that's a big part of, like, we have our team meetings, and we'll often talk about them together. Like, oh, I had this situation, and like my value of this was really jammed up, right? And we'll do some coaching with each other, and that I think is to have two highly competent teammates that are walking me through and helping me, like, shine a light on things in a different way, or teasing out really good questions where I'm like, oh shit, I didn't see that one coming, or I didn't see that one at play, and I'm gonna have to do some more thinking about that. And having people that deeply know, like, where we know each other's values, and we can ask really good questions, or be like, hey, this reminds me of that time that you had this other thing happen. Is it connected to those values that were showing up at that time? And just having, like, partners in reflection, and partners in values, partners in safety, like having those conversations, I think partners in community is really lovely. I want to also reflect that every single time we go through like a live version of values, know your values workshop, where we're like, okay, now everyone go in and pick your top values. Or when we go into other workshops where we're like, okay, if you don't have them, go get your top 5 or whatever. By the way, top 5 is not that like a magic number. Just, have a cut that where we're not looking at the 40 or the 100, have like a manageable group. And as Christina and Ali both pointed out, it can grow and shrink as needed. But people really struggle. This is really hard. And I just want to say, like, picking 5 values, for example, is difficult, and it should be. It should be difficult because we're asking you to negotiate with yourself around who you are and what you stand for. Like it's no big deal, but it is a big deal. It should be hard because this is like a deep compromise with your unconscious self. Like, you're really like, is it this or is it this? And you're having these, like, conversations with your unconscious mind. And it's like, let's acknowledge that's really an unusual thing to do, and a lot to ask somebody in a live environment. So normalize that. If you're finding it difficult, it should be, you're doing it right. If it's difficult, and if it's not difficult, you may not be taking it as seriously. This may be a little bit of like, family is important to me because I'm a good person, and family should be important, right? And then being honest. Well, obviously a good person would be honest. Like, if it's that simple, you might not be diving into it enough, but that's a good place to start. Even if you get that far, that's cool, but know that you need to dive down a little bit deeper. I absolutely have a list on my phone, and that was really important to me when I first started like articulating, like using this in conversation, where would have to like, what's going on? Why am I so upset? And then I'd have to pull them up on my phone because when I'm in distress or in conflict, my logical brain isn't thinking of solutions, but I know enough to be like, wait, I can phone a friend. It's on my phone. I can figure it out. And then I can talk about things in a more logical way with other folks, saying, you know what, there's something funny here about like this doesn't quite feel like an honest conversation. And in framing it in a neutral way, like not that you're dishonest, but there's something that's not being said here. And it's kind of bothering me. There's something it doesn't have to be dishonest, but just something unsaid or something going on in the background that isn't out on the table that we need to talk about. And that really helps me in the moment. And then I journal incessantly. I don't want to brag about that, but it's kind of weird. Like I buy thick journals. I'm not like oh, let's buy this cute little like 10-page one where, I'm gonna like log my how many steps I took today. Like these are binders of paper, and I'm writing out here's what's going on for me emotionally, or even like just tracking things that happen. And I'm always like underlining the value words because I'm just getting it out, and then I'm coaching myself through it, which is fun. And just to watch like how my brain is sharing my values without my brain even noticing that I'm sharing my values until my brain goes back in and finds my values. It's some kind of inception thing here. And then the other piece I do is I self-monitor a lot. When I'm caught in brain loops, when I'm caught with like talking to myself and I look at my dog's like, oh, are you okay? That tells me that something is going on for me, that I need to like I'm stuck in a conflict and I haven't done the work to understand what is frustrated and what I would prefer instead. I haven't done the work if I'm stuck in a brain loop. So I won't go into too much because the values-based planner, absolutely. I designed it in a way that would help me do all, like I can't even talk about it better than what Christina said. Uh like looking at my week, my month ahead, is important. Tracking on a weekly, daily basis, like, am I getting there? Did I get closer on these, so that I can be like, I'm still neglecting this value, or I'm really satisfying this one, and I am knocking it out of the park. And then doing that reflection at the end of the month. How do I feel about this month? You know what? There might be some really good reasons because these values got over satisfied. And again, these little guys are like out in the cold, and I really thought I thought I was nailing it, and I really wasn't. And I need to pay closer attention, do my own satisfying of them. Like whatever I'm intending, it's not working. Whatever I'm asking other people to do, it's not working. So what is in my span of control? Where can I satisfy these values? Because I need to get them back in a place that feels right for them, and will bring like integrity, like living in integrity with my values, back on track.
I love that. Can we take a moment to just share our top values, just so our audience can kind of get to know us a little bit better? How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, holla. You start, Christina.
Ooh, okay. So I actually kind of have two sets. So I have personal and I have work. They are fairly different, surprisingly. So personally, my absolute top value is authenticity. And I'm just going to share a description with it because I know I just talked about how, in my opinion, the definition is way more important than the word. So, authenticity to me is having the comfort to be my true self in front of others, with no mask, and expecting the same thing from other people. You know, there's no walls, and we're all vulnerable, and we can just be ourselves. And I find that that is where we can have that true connection. Which leads me to my second value of connection. Connection to me, it has all to do with love and presence. And I find that that is exceptionally important to me because I have such a high mental load, being a mom, working full time, managing a household, being a wife, and, trying to do things for myself as well. So being present is really important to shut off everything else that's in my brain. And I expect others to do that for me as well. Balance is another really big one. As I had mentioned in my earlier example, it's just a balance of all the aspects of my life so that I'm not just focusing on work or I'm not just focusing on family and then falling behind on everything else. So just achieving that balance brings me peace, brings me that connection as well. And creativity is another one of mine. Self-expression. I love sewing. I love painting. My daughter is so artsy too, so we get connection through there. And there's a lot to do with pride and growth in creativity because you can explore things through curiosity. And at the end, it's like, I made this. This is so amazing. And I can show it off. Like, look what I did. And creativity is not just arts. It could be gardening for me. It could be anything that I do with my hands and my mind. And then lastly, love is still the broad term. And I find that it's very closely linked to service. And I'm still, experimenting with whether or not love needs to be replaced with a different word, such as service or indulgence. Love is not just between people for me. It's, having that true, what's the word here? That gratitude, that being grateful for what I have, for this nice hot cup of coffee and quiet around me, or being out in nature, connecting with others or providing services for people, because that's my love language. So that's something that I'm experimenting with, but I figured I'd share both sides of that. How about you, Ali?
Yeah, sure. I can share mine and then Corrine and then Gavin, I will check in with you about your top 5 values if you want to share them. And then also if you want to share them, how you got to them. My top 5, number 1, in no particular priority order. Number 1, love, which I am sort of considering the basis by which all decisions are made. Corrine's magic question of what's the most loving thing you can do here? Number 2, meaning, which is things and states of mind that allow me to feel inspired by existing. Number 3, peace, which is for me means internally feeling balanced. Number 4, pleasure, which is my capacity to enjoy life and life's moments. And then number 5, self-trust, the one I mentioned earlier, which basically means, I think, something around having my own back. So those are my 5. What about you, Corrine?
Love those. And I really enjoyed the way, like, we've had this conversation 100 times, and each time I'm like, oh, I can have this conversation to the end of days and never get bored with it. For me, I've got like this set of values that are inherent in everything, and it's peace, love, and joy. And I find there's a lot of things that underpin those ones. For love, respect, connection, spiritual connection, and exactly like what is everything that I do, I'm stitched out of love, and it's like just inherent in who I am. And the peace one is around relaxed time, integrity with my like living an integrous life, presence, balance, joy being about spontaneity. I am the antithesis of a type A. I don't even think a type B, maybe C, D, or R. Like if I had no rules and it was just, I would be so happy. I've got to put some like parameters in my life to be functional and whatnot. And I value that, but ugh, if I could not and just like live in the woods, that would be my ideal. And then unscripted fun, creativity, friend time, that kind of stuff. But then there's like the other ones that are like courage and honesty and non-judgment are like so important to me. And these are the ones that show up when I'm unhappy, right? When I'm not standing in courage, I am really struggling. When I think there's a situation that I'm involved in that is not honest, my sarcasm will rage up and take control and be like, oh, so we're not talking about the thing that we all need to talk about? Shut up, Kareen. Shut up. But here she goes. And now here, and she's taking over. And then non-judgment, when I feel like there's a judgmental situation that is unnecessary, unwarranted, and this not about discernment. This is about judging. And I have such a like a little rage monster about that being not okay. You can't judge someone because you don't know their story. You don't know what their values are. You don't understand the situation with the wholeness and completeness that like you give yourself this. Like to judge is a really arrogant space to be. And when I am being judgmental, I have a very strong judgment about myself. So I get caught in all these loops. And I need to just understand them and love them and say these are just as much a part of me as any other really, really lovely ones that I am proud to stand behind and say that's who I am. These other ones are just as much me as well. And I stand a much better chance of holding on to the rage monster or standing in assertive space rather than sarcastic space when I know what is about to trigger me, or I know where this feeling that's rising up inside me is. So that.
No big deal. Just all the foundations of my like internal systems. Gavin, what do you want to share, if anything, no pressure, about your top values and how you arrived at them?
Ah, well, yeah, that's the interesting part of how do you get to them. And my my two keys are either frustration or a sense of peace. So top values, I would say connection, and that is less about sharing interest completely and more about valuing the differences and wanting to understand the differences, kind of especially when you don't share them. Like that respect for the differences, that appreciation of it, that being happy for someone else because they're happy. Um, Another one is I would call it sense making. I just love taking things apart, and I've, not just mechanical stuff, but human interactions and that, and seeing how conversations and relationships go, and being able to, I think I've got some insight into that's where it went wrong. That's kind of, if you framed it this way, would you both come to a conclusion on that? I like that part of just seeing something different in that. And two values that are distinct but tied together and have various shadowy aspects are learning and agency. So can I still understand something? Can I learn something new? There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. There's curiosity and humility and acceptance, and reality wins. It doesn't, because things don't work the way I think they work just because I want them to work that way. Reality has a veto over that. So that leads to frustration. And frustration in that case is this is good because I'm about to learn something new. My world is about to get bigger. And agency is, it's kind of like the test for my learning. Like, can I actually change the world into the way I want? And, Corrine gave me a wonderful ability to do that in the last few months that has the best of that separation out and the shadowy aspects and the joy of it and all of that. She let me work on her vehicle that she named Calliope, which is the Greek muse of epic or heroic poetry. And Calliope has certainly been jerking me around in the most wonderful way about how I think things work the one way and then they don't. And then I learn another way, and that's still not right. This is Calliope just messing me around for 4 months now, is it? Like since the beginning of November? I have not given up on it, and that's a shadowy aspect, but it's also deeply satisfying to try and get something to work. So yeah, I hope that gives you a bit of insight into what's going on in my head with values.
And Calliope, that gives me so much more fondness instantly for that vehicle. What a great vehicle name. Thank you, Gavin. Yeah, for laying that out and reminding me your top values and your a little bit of like how you see them showing up and you talking about like I'm getting to know them as I'm living my life, right? Like something happens and it hits me with realization about, okay, this is a frustrating situation, or wow, I'm really at peace right now. What does this mean for what's important to me and what my top 5 values are? I can't believe this, but we only have like 10 minutes left in our scheduled time. But let's use it to give a couple other examples of real life situations where our values are at play. So thanks for that segue, Gavin, because we've talked about how we get to know what our values are. And then there's this like transition piece around how we actually live in alignment with them and how attempting to live in alignment with them actually gives us more information about what our values even are and how to do that. So let's share examples until we run out of time of times when a value has been satisfied and a value has been frustrated. I'm going to attempt to do like a 60-second example of that and then pass to maybe Christina, because I think you might have one. So for me, peace. I learned something new about peace recently. Peace was satisfied for me when I was out in a bar surrounded by people and it was very noisy. There was like an art throwdown where there's like 3 artists on stage and they have an hour to paint a painting. And then we all vote at the end and then someone wins and then the paintings are auctioned off and it was like so fun and the energy was really like nourishing. And that is not an environment that I'm in very often. Because usually my nervous system hums at a lower, more like slower vibration. But that night I was just about to move. I was like moving the next day and I was all jazzed and like my system was like producing all this extra energy. And I was like trying to find an environment that matched my nervous system's energy, which to me is peaceful. And there happened to be this night and some friends of mine were going and I was like, I'm going to the bar, which I laugh because I don't usually go to the bar. And I did, and I stayed just the right amount of time for my nervous system to like use up that extra energy that it had. And it was actually really peaceful to be in that state of internal nervous system matching the energy of the external environment. Peace was also frustrated about 5 days into moving, I would say, when my euphoria wore off and we still had stuff to do. And doing external tasks that are not connected directly to meaning wears on me quickly. And so the smallest, like day 5, the smallest task, even the smallest conversation was just like a stab into my nervous system that needed to gear down. Like it needed slow, peaceful sounds only, quiet sounds only, dim lighting only. And yet, I had appointments and I had things to pick up from Facebook Marketplace and I had like stuff to do still and conversations to coordinate. And so peace was very frustrated. Even though I was in a arguably less stimulating environment, my capacity for stimulation was lower. And so peace was frustrated there. What about you, Christina? What's an example?
I love that you know that about yourself, and just I'm always in awe hearing the different definitions of these words. So thanks for sharing that. I'll just use authenticity as an example. I my value of authenticity is deeply satisfied when I am connecting with people below the surface. Surface talk is like the worst for me. It makes me feel so uncomfortable. It just portrays fakeness for some reason, and I can't handle it. And like I want to know people. I want to know what makes you tick, why you're here, how did you get here? And so I really thrive on that, and that gets me very satisfied. Um, Seeing Karina and Allie's faces on Zoom makes me highly satisfied because they are very authentic people, and it just warms my heart because I just feel that soul connection, you know? Um, when it's an example for frustration is, when my kids have play dates, I go on or birthday parties, and usually what happens is the women and the men separate, and the women start talking about superficial things like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I painted my bedroom periwinkle. I wanted lilac. I don't give a shit about this kind of stuff. I really don't. I'm not a materialistic person. I'm more of that connection. And so I often will drift towards the men who will talk more about real stuff and and aren't afraid to talk honestly. And that's what I really appreciate, because when I'm in situations where there's judgment or when there's superficiality or materialism, I don't feel like that's authentic, because oftentimes I find, it's status driven. It's, the social hierarchy that everybody's trying to be a part of. And it is not ingrained in me to try and fit in. If I don't feel comfortable and I can't be my own self because there is going to be that judgment or the look, then I don't want to be there. And I don't have to. And I realize I don't have to. So I I often don't go out and just socialize with people for the sake of socialization. I'll often even leave the moms and go play with the kids because they are authentic. It's the joy, it's that curiosity, it's that connection and authenticity is there with them versus the parents. So, how about you, Corinne?
I love this so much. Like Christina, your deep soul craving is so beautiful and relatable, and I love it so much. And Allie, also reflecting on what you just talked about, Allie, like this elite level of body energy awareness blows my damn mind every single time, and it's something I aspire to, and I'm like, I just wish I had the bandwidth to do the things that you talk about so casually, and I know they're not easy for you, Allie. I know this is a long fought for thing, and I look forward to when I have more ease in that way. So for me, I just had one recently where our organization was hosting an event, and there's a small group discussion, and there was a shutting down of voice by one participant to another participant. And I wasn't at this conversation, but in the debrief, I found out about it. And so I interviewed the folks in my organization. I was like, what was that like for you? And this courage value just kept popping up, and watching them say like, I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what my organization wanted me to do or say in that, and I feel so bad that I couldn't stand in my courage. And so we drilled into like, what was your experience? How can you say like I did the best I could? And what do we need to give you instead so that you can be in that situation inevitably again, but you know the organization will have your back, or that you can say something that is from your heart, that is acknowledging of the situation. And so, and then I'll be, by the way, reaching out to the participants and having similar conversations with them as well, being like, okay, this might happen again. How can we do this differently? But being able to watch how this, no matter who I spoke to in this like very different experiences, this I wanted to be courage, and I felt bad that I abandoned, that I walked back on my courage, that I wasn't able to do what I usually do, because I didn't know, didn't have that trust in my organization. So, coming at those conversations from a values based perspective is absolutely neutralizing that, these things happen, and how do we do better in the future was made this a positive experience. And it's not done yet, but I have every belief that when we're done, this is going to be, we're going to be better than where we were before. And I'm so excited about that. Nobody has a clue that they're having values based conversations with me, but they every time we end the conversation, they're like, I feel so great. I feel so empowered. I'm like, I know. I know. And you're a great person. I will talk to you later. And they're like glowing because they've just had a conversation about the deepest things in their heart in this professional context that isn't a normal conversation, but there was nothing also abnormal about it. Right. Fun.
And they were given permission to deeply care about those things, because I know what it's like to have a conversation with you about values and you're so validating that these are important. We tend to identify something and we go, anyway, like enough about me. But you're like, no, no, no. You just identified the next hour of our conversation. Go on. And it feels so, when we actually feel like we can do it, it feels so good to do. So it speaks to how beneficial it is to have like a coaching environment to be able to explore our values. And it's a big, I didn't mention it, but I think you did, Kareem. It's a huge way that I've helped to identify what my values are. I can only go so far on my own, and then I do need someone to witness the process and to reflect back what I've said, and it things click in a different way, absolutely, when that's done.
Yeah, there's something about being heard, right? And just being able to talk about it and, hearing yourself say it versus just feeling it almost makes it even more of a truth. It draws that out and it's like, oh, I just said that. That is exactly what I need. And I don't know how I never knew about it. You knew about it. You just subconsciously, right? You needed to drag it out. And yeah, it's a lovely thing to be able to have that platform. And like we had mentioned earlier on in this episode, um, have that safe space to be able to explore that.
That's it. And we offer a limited amount of coaching slots for folks who are into that. It's more of like a premium service because it's one-on-one, right? But reach out if that is something that you're interested in. Or if you want to reach out, we're happy to always give other ideas of ways you might be able to receive the same kind of like coaching experience. So feel free to reach out. Speaking of which, if you do want more of a guided process to get to know your values over and above the values quiz, take the course. Or if you've already taken the course, you have it for life. So it's a good place to go to check in. There's it's self-paced, and it's a series of videos from the lovely Kareen guiding you through very gently each of the different phases. So even if you jump back in and skip to like module 3, because that's the part that's getting sticky for you, try that. Try going back in, and it can sometimes you jump in and then you get inspired and then you're able to go back on your own. We'll put a link to the Know Your Values course in the show notes. So that's time. Thank you so much for being part of the conversation, all of you, and for those who are listening. And we will be back again next month for our next topic. Who knows yet what it will be, but I'm sure it will be fascinating. Okay, thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.